somewhere in the broad world of finance. I mean, you know, and I'm glad to define finance really broad. You know, you'll pick. So that's kind of the piece. Act 1 are the fundamentals. I won't go through each of the pieces, but you know, that's in the syllabus, of course. Act 2 is the pivot of the economics, and Act 3 are financial sector use cases. And hopefully throughout we'll have a lot of fun. So the study questions for next Tuesday, real quick, what are the roles and characteristics of money? So I really want to sort of dig behind money. Money is but a social construct or a social convention, medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account. There's some readings about the debate whether money first came from the barter system, or a really good set of anthropologists and archaeologists and everything say, no, it actually came as a ledger system. And no one knows for sure 10 and 15,000 years ago whether money came from out of the barter system or more as a unit of account, keeping account of credits and ledger. But I'd say when you read through some of those readings, you start to think, well, this is just a societal construct. And so we'll get behind that. What is fiat currency? Fiat currency, which is an invention really only of the last few hundred years, and we take for granted now, but how does that fit into that whole history? And importantly, how do ledgers, accounting ledgers, I know boring stuff, but it's probably why we came out of the Dark Ages about 500 or 600 years ago with double entry bookkeeping. Sorry, I like ledgers. We'll talk a little bit about ledgers and how that fits into money and securities and so forth. And then layering in how Bitcoin fits on top of that history. Next Tuesday is not deeply about Bitcoin. It's just a little dollop on that. There'll be 5 or 6 readings. One of them is a 3-minute video. The third one, it's fun. Watch it. It's just a funny little video on what money is. There's no need to read Nakamoto's full paper. When I said the email, I mean just the cover email. It's 1 paragraph. My goal in the readings each week was not, in each session, was by and large try to keep less than 50 pages. You'd say, you're going to look sometimes, you go, it looks like it's more, and maybe it is. I figure you're all going to figure out for yourself how to sort through the depth of your knowledge. But I will predict that some of you, maybe as much as a quarter or a third of you, are going to go down a rabbit hole one day. And you're going to be doing blockchain for the next 48 hours and you won't know where the time went. Because it is an addiction at some point that some of you will get, because it's this curious notion. I'm not predicting that infirmity for all of you. I'm just saying some of you will have that happen to you. So occasionally I have readings just, why, Ilana, it's happened to you?
I think so.
Let me just conclude and then take any other questions that might up there. Blockchain, I think, does provide a peer-to-peer alternative. I think that, I hope Larry, I'll be able to convince. It does provide, and that peer-to-peer alternative addresses cost of trust. It doesn't mean it's the only way to address cost of trust, but it addresses cost of trust. The financial sector does have challenges. Not just that it has 7.5% of our economy in the US and similar ratios around the globe, but resilience, how it survives shocks, the financial crisis and things like that are real, and inclusion. 1.7 billion people unbanked, but then if you look at other products, who has access to credit cards and mortgages and the like. And then fiat currencies, Ken Rogoff and others have written a lot about the instabilities that come that fiat currencies, and we'll talk about some of the history and why central banks exist and how they came about. Next key point is we already live in an electronic age. Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin didn't create electronic cash. Electronic cash, I mean, Sandra Bullock couldn't pay electronically. That was 1995. They did a sort of B-rated movie about it all. But by today, you pay your tuition online, those of you who work get paid online, you pay your auto loans online. Most of our lives are electronic cash. Not 100%, but in some countries like Sweden, it's getting very close to 100%. We'll learn together and discover that money is but a social and economic consensus. Blockchain technology along to crypto finance might be a catalyst for change, and then much masquerades as fact, but it's only mere assertion. We're going to try to sort through, those differences. That doesn't mean that all of you are going to walk out agreeing with Paul Krugman, a Nobel laureate, or Nouriel Roubini that this is just a bunch of nonsense. Some of you might, by the way. But I think you'll come out with real critical thinking skills. And I hope that some of you will say, I figured out actually where there's a real opportunity in the world of finance to use blockchain technology and make it a better financial sector. Democratizing finance, or somehow providing a service at a lower cost, a better service throughout. I hope throughout that we'll learn together and we'll have a bit of fun along the way. So that's kind of my thoughts. Questions? We have exactly, 18 minutes. There you go. But we can cut it short, too. I don't care. There we go. Could you tell me your name? And we're going to do placards. Ryan's going to work to figure out, and do placards, because...
It's Young here. I wonder how are the teams formed to find a project?
How the teams formed? Traditionally, anybody at Sloan can speak to this too, but students do it their own, so that the faculty doesn't sort of try to insert themselves to help you. But we tend towards the latter half and say, well, who's formed up in groups? And when, if it's a smaller group, it's like, well, anybody who's not yet formed in a team, why don't you move to the left-hand side of the room and just get together? But we could do that electronically too. And whether Talita and Sabrina, who could help in turn to basically have a social network to help form the teams. Because this is a big group, you're right. But that's traditionally. The students do it on their own. Other questions? Is anybody going to go out and sell their Bitcoin now? No. Larry, why are you here? No.
Other than the payments you talked about? No, I'm here because I think you're going to bring a critical skepticism to the whole field. And you're incredibly informed about the finance side, so I want to see the combination of those and whether at the end I'm still convinced there's a there there. I am convinced that there's a there, as we've spoken, because I really think it can radically change the cost of trust around the world, and that will benefit the developing nations substantially. But I think there's a lot of questions I still have, and I'm eager to see how this conversation helps it come up.
Well, I thank you for coming, and any week you could be here any day, we benefit. And I hope this is meant to be a conversation. I'm not that far ahead of you. Simon Johnson approached me last October and said, what do you think about coming up to MIT? And Tom knows this story. And we were sitting down for lunch in DC, and it was a good time in my life. My 3 girls, I have 3 daughters, and I'm a single dad. And they were, 2 are in grad school and 1 are undergrad. It was a good time in my life. I said, well, why not? Come up here and get engaged in this digital currency initiative over at the Media Lab. And I've spent a life. I was 18 years at Goldman Sachs on the investment banking side, helping people buy and sell companies, called mergers and acquisitions. And then I went to the trading side, fixed income. I went off to Asia and did I ran the fixed income and currency and swap trading in Asia. And then my last job was the co-finance officer. So we were about $250 billion balance sheet at that time. Goldman Sachs, this is. We were so private, which meant if we lost money, I was a general partner, was kaput. That's a technical word. And, but we had 700 legal entities and 1,000 people who could commit the capital of the firm. Those are people we generally call traders. But, you know, it was a fascinating period of time. I then went on to public service because Bob Rubin knew that I'd be a soft touch to service. He was the Treasury Secretary. I was a former partner at Goldman Sachs. And I went off to the U.S. Treasury as an assistant secretary and undersecretary in the late 90s, a little different times than we have now for many reasons. But we were paying down the debt. We were dealing with the Asian debt crisis, long-term capital management, the Russian debt crisis. It was sort of a fascinating period of time. I worked on a bill with John McCain. I didn't get to know Senator McCain that well, but it was just remarkable to work with even for a short period of time, called e-signature. It was a bill that basically said you can sign everything electronically. And he was the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee at the time. It was a wonderful, sometimes in government, you can work on small things. I worked on the redesign of the currency. And I could tell you stories about why it looks the way it does and how you can redesign paper currency. And for a future lecture, I'll tell you the one design feature that is still in the currency, and you can visually see it. And when I asked for it, the fellow that ran the Bureau of Engraving said, why? And I said, because it looks better. And I'm the guy that's approving it, and maybe can we get it done? Can we work this out? And it did look better, and he loved it. He was worried about the political risk of doing it. It was a better design. I said, I'll cover you politically, let's do it. But then I worked with Paul Sarbanes and what became Sarbanes-Oxley. I was his senior advisor. I worked and kicked around some political campaigns. We lost 2 of them. That would be the 08 Hillary campaign and the 16 Hillary campaign. I was her chief financial officer. I was in 08 a senior advisor doing economic policy and outreach and hand-holding and, oh, gosh. And then in the middle of those 2 campaigns, I ran something called the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which was post-crisis. What do we do? This is a real public policy shortcoming. And I looked at it as an opportunity to, as I said, democratize finance a bit and lower risk. And so we tried to bring transparency to a $300 or $400 trillion market called swaps, which are just contracts for transference of risk. And they're a form of a derivative that were unregulated. And we were trying to bring transparency to that and lower risk through central clearing. So that's sort of my professional life. And as I said, I got 3 daughters, and they're well situated. So when Simon said, come on up, I said, great. And I love MIT. It's just terrific. And you all are great. Unless there's other questions, I'm going to let you go early. I don't.
I guess you can't call home and say, it's too warm today.
Yeah, that's something that I was talking with my family the last time I talked with them, because they told me it is too cold in Quito right now. It is unbelievable, we cannot live in like this. And I was like, okay, and how much it is?
The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseWare continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseWare at ocw.mit.edu.
Welcome back. People can sit at that back table, or Rob, you want to come up here? So I said you'd have a special...
Focus on you during class. I'm his twin brother. So.
Everybody can meet my twin brother, Rob. Rob's not your guest speaker, he's my guest, but he will speak a little later when we talk about Norio Rubini and Rubini's thoughts on blockchain economics. Rob worked at T. Rowe Price for 25 years, 24 years?
20 years. Before that on Wall Street for 10, Solomon Brothers most of that.
So he's from Solomon Brothers Wall Street. He started his own hedge fund, and that didn't work out, so he closed that hedge fund. He went to work for T. Rowe Price. for 20 years, and he ran a global equity fund, but before that he was doing telecom and investment. But I will ask Rob, as an asset manager who ran $20 billion of money at one point in time and was successful at it, his thoughts about this cryptocurrency, crypto phase. He has not, as opposed to everybody in this class, he has not read the readings for today's class, but I know you all read the readings, maybe.
What do you need?
But that will be when we're talking a little bit about the blockchain minimalists. So we're now turning into what I call Act 2. We've talked a lot about the economics of blockchain throughout talking about the technology. But now we're going to take today and Thursday really to dive a little bit more into the economics. Now, of course, we're talking about the economics the entire semester, but this is going to be just, we're just going to stay right on that. And because my goal on this journey together is that we all get a little bit closer to the ground truth, separating the hype from the reality. I've tried to put in the readings, if you've chosen to sort of even do the skim read or look in, some of the blockchain minimalists, like the Nouriel Roubini piece that you had.
charging.
And it doesn't get much more minimalist than Roubini's piece. But I think it's relevant to know where Paul Krugman or Nouriel Roubini or Joe Stiglitz or others are on this technology. I don't happen to agree with them. But I'm not all the way over on the other side. I'm not with the Tim Drapers. And yesterday I had the honor to appear at a conference in New York City where Fidelity was rolling out their new blockchain digital asset business. And so I was the setup speaker, I guess. But one of the other speakers there was Mike Novogratz, who started a company called Galaxy. I would put Mike and some others closer to the maximalist, or he cautioned me he's not a 10 on the 10 scale, he's probably an 8. So, but I've tried to put into this readings and this course so that you can leave this course with critical reasoning skills. Really, what are the economics? So let's go on that journey together today. And also, I say, think about some of what we're talking about today in light of your final projects, because you're going to be looking for some pain point in finance, or if with a little special discussion with me outside of finance, and saying, what's a use case that all this crazy blockchain stuff can come together and actually work on it. So, so the overview, of course, as always, I'll talk a little bit about what our readings. I'll see if we'll do a little Socratic method. So we're going to talk about blockchain economics, a little bit about blockchain versus the internet. That was Joey Ito's article that kind of set that up, and Joey wrote that several years ago. He might write it a little differently now, but I still think it's really relevant to get behind. How do we think of blockchain versus the internet? I call him the minimalist, whether it's Roubini or Krugman or Stiglitz, or Gensler. You're going to hear from one back in that Gensler, who came 3 minutes after this Gensler. Well, he might have come before me, actually, because, Rob, you lived in Botswana, and didn't they believe that the second delivered was the first conceived? But we're identical, so maybe it didn't have it that way. And some costs, and I'm sorry, I mean, oh yes, we have to do the twins thing, How many twins in this class? Yeah, all right. Yeah. It might be just statistical. And you said you're Peruvian identical twin?
I have an identical twin.
Identical twin.
Identical. He's a medical doctor. He lives in Peru. And in Peru, by the way, they do say that the second is the older.
The second delivered is
Kind of the older.
so has the birthright.
I was the first, so I tend to disagree.
Rob has the birthright in Peru. We'll talk about costs and trade-offs. We've done a little bit of this in the past, and then we'll wrap it up. And a little fewer slides. I slimmed this out just so we can have a bit more discussion. But the study questions, how to decentralize blockchain applications affect the cost of verification and cost of networking. And anybody want to dive into that, or we want to dive in when I do the little bit? I'll give my read about how blockchain changes verification and networking. Those are the two things. That was in the Christian Catalini paper. I know you didn't love it that I signed a 30-some page paper, but Christian's at the forefront of this. He's in the Sloan faculty. He's not here. He's sort of on a sabbatical semester. But Christian's paper, he's at the forefront of the economics around blockchain. You can't take a good blockchain course without reading Catalini's paper. And it's not just because he's a Sloanie. I think he's kind of got that. And then the comparison to the internet. So it's sort of those two big items. And I know somebody said there were too many readings. There was only 5 that were required. Of course, Rubini's was just low-hanging fruit because he gave it last Thursday. And it was, how many people read the Rubini piece? It wasn't required, but so about a third or a half. Do you agree it was kind of a slapdown? What do you think, Aline?
It was hilarious. I loved it.
You loved it?
I couldn't really finish it, but it was hilarious.
How many of you that read the Rubini piece found that you agreed with most of what he said? Okay, so 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, Aline, 6. Lauren. Wow.
I don't know. Every time I read one, I'm like, yeah, they totally know what they're talking about. I'm on board. And I feel the same way with all the like minimalists now.
So you're identifying with the minimalists now? Okay. Okay. On Thursday, you're going to read things like an open letter to Jamie Dimon that kind of goes, it's not a maximalist, but it kind of goes the other way. And then the optional bits. So let's start a little bit with blockchain economics. And the first thing, verification. So what are the costs? Anybody who actually dove into the longer Catalini piece. The cost of verification. And these are things that I'm not just presenting because somebody wrote about it. I think Christian's right about this. I think that the blockchain doesn't always, but can really lower the cost of verification. Bo, do you have a?
You talked about efficiently verifying and auditing the transactions that happen, and the cost of that is low.
So efficiently auditing and lowering the cost of auditing transactions. What else did he talk about, Kelly?
Part of that efficiency was the fact that currently there's quite a few third-party actors that are involved, like separate between like the input and output actors.
Right. So you might have fewer people in the chain, fewer actors.
Anton, they also mentioned the privacy costs and also the censorship risk.
Okay, so let me you raised 2, privacy and censorship. Do you want to say, or somebody else, what is it about privacy? I mean, because these are really critical things that blockchain can do.
So with privacy, right, the address was anonymous, so like there's no name attached to an address, so you can interact peer-to-peer without people knowing who you are necessarily.
Right. So, but why does that matter? So,
why would people pay more to be able to do that?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, there's an understanding that there's like a fundamental right to privacy, right? You don't want the world to know all of your doings.
So some of it's about rights and values, James.
The key element was hacking. There's clear examples when people's information was so readily available and a third party get hacked.
Totally agree, but what's the big commercial thing that's going on right now in big data?
Intermediaries can profit from that information they're gathering as
I mean, the dominant, I'm sorry?
So resale of the user data as well as the linkage in social security and everything.
So what Sean and Eric are saying, the dominant revenue model in tech today, whether it's big tech like Facebook and Google and so forth, or any tech, the dominant revenue model, not the only, is basically give me some of your data, let me analyze it, and either advertise against it or somehow in these days use machine learning and AI to analyze it and really market other products back to you, maybe. We all do it. We live in this. We give up our data, some more so than others, some less so, but it's a big piece. Blockchain, Catalini raises, well, maybe you can get a little bit more privacy. If you wish it, it might be part of the revenue model. How about censorship? What was the point about censorship?
High peaks are meant to be there.
Anyway.
So
So when you're dealing with a central authority, a commercial bank, they can decide whether to extend credit or not. That's a form of censorship. It's a form of allocating something. But it can be as simple as to whether to even sell you the ticket to the movie theater or not, you know, in a sense. It doesn't happen to us often. But distributed, decentralized platforms are more censorship resistant, I mean, on a spectrum. Anything else from verification? So let's see how we did. So this was how I sort of take it back, these 6 points. The direct cost. There may be a cost trade-off that blockchain could have a lower cost of verification. It doesn't always, but a lot of verification in finance has multiple back offices trying to reconcile between ledgers. We've talked a lot in this class about ledgers. Ledgers recording property rights. So you can have one bank recording the property rights, another bank recording a property right. It could be the ownership of equities. It could be cash, called payments. So there's a lot of direct costs that it can lower. And I would say in the permission blockchain space, a lot of big banks are looking at that very first point. We can just lower our direct costs of the back office. Stop there, straight and simple. We have a lot less reconciliation costs.
thank you.
Privacy and data leakage costs. I call it both privacy, which sounds like, you know, Hugo, and I want my personal privacy, or I just know kind of Facebook is taking my data. I call that data leakage. You know, I'm not terribly worried about it, but God, it's something. Aline.
I'm very curious, is there a use case here? Because I really failed to see one. Like, I could see privacy in the sense that, well, you could transfer coins from anonymous spenders to anonymous receivers, and you could even hide the amount, and that's useful for business because businesses don't want other businesses knowing what they're up to. But what other use case is there?
Oh, I think it's a very good question. Anybody have an answer for Aline? Because I do, but I just do others. Like a business use case where you might have users not giving up as much of their data and privacy. Okay, I'm going to use Uber. Oh, did you?
Yeah, I think an example I can think of is, for example, the hedge fund in the asset management. A hedge fund in asset management industry. You don't want to know, like, because, for example, lots of hedge funds, they hide behind the brokers. They have certain like swaps with the brokers, so they don't have to review their position they build, and also they try to build their position under the 5% threshold. So in this way, any action, their action maybe can move the market of a certain stock.
Okay, so there's a commercial situation as an asset manager. I might not want others to know what trades I'm doing, what positions I'm taking. I was going to use a personal situation. You could envision Uber having been created on a blockchain. It's not on a blockchain, but I'm saying you could have envisioned it. Riders, equipment owners called car owners, and drivers. It's like three communities: who owns the car, who drives the car, who needs the cars, coming together on a blockchain. And maybe part of the reason I'm comfortable with a blockchain Uber, maybe me, is I might have a few girlfriends and I don't want anybody tracking that I'm visiting different girlfriends. This would be, you would call it privacy, but perfectly, I'm single. But I'm just saying that, you know, it's a perfectly legitimate thing that, do I want to share that data? We all share a tremendous amount of data if we use a credit card that, particularly in today's world of machine learning and AI, that you can take somebody's spending patterns and really narrow down. Let's, for instance, say that I have a certain religious affiliation or a certain pro-guns or anti-guns or any orientation I might have. You get enough spending patterns, you can sort of piece together, that's probably you. That's probably your religion, that's probably your sexual orientation, that's probably the country you're from, the ethnic group. If you pull enough spending pattern coupled with machine learning and AI. So use cases, people are really talking about, well, maybe there's something that I can give a little privacy preserving attribute. It won't be the dominant use case, but something. And this class today is just about economics. That's a legitimate economic thing that's going on here. Was there a hand over here? Censorship risk, basically that, oh, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a related question? So in terms of the privacy, the article also mentioned like those financial institutions, like before this, they can just keep their data like inside and only maybe reveal that to regulators. But if we use the blockchain, they need to make all those information public, and that's kind of like the other, exactly opposite to keeping it private.
So to the regulators, you said?
Like say one thing, it keeps you anonymous, so that's kind of protection of privacy. But on the other side, you need to public all the information, which may otherwise be just among some certain institutions.
Right. So you're absolutely, remind me your first name? Jennifer. Jennifer's right. There's a tension. The traditional blockchains like Bitcoin have both. They mask a lot of data because of the pseudonymity, but it's not truly completely masked because you can use forensics and track things. And to verify a permissionless blockchain, it's all public. So I agree with you. It sort of goes both ways. There are technical ways, whether through zero knowledge proofs and other ways, to have more privacy. But I'm saying there's a legitimate economic cause. Paul Krugman's last sentence in his op-ed was, tell me a use case. Tell me, remember Krugman's like, he's a Nobel laureate. Paul's brilliant, and he writes eloquently for the New York Times. But there are, and Jennifer, you're right, it's not perfect yet, but there are privacy attributes that you can give to a system. I do want to clarify, I only have one girlfriend. She lives in New York. Just want to make sure. There was a hypothetical about Uber. Realized we're on film.
The others all think it's me.
There you go. There you go. Woo. Thank you, Rob. There was a story. No. Okay. Settlement. We've talked about this. I think if you don't have some economics around settlement, that you don't need some immutable record of the movement of a right, particularly a property right, you might just as well just stay with a traditional database. I'm not sure I'm entirely right about that. There might be some permissioned blockchain worthwhile, but I'm kind of of the view if you're not moving something that matters, and settlement means something that's final. We talked briefly 6 or 8 lectures ago about that old lawsuit in Scotland, the Crawford case, that if James steals $1 from me, but then hands the dollar to Andrew, I can't get it back from Andrew. I have no legal rights to get my dollar from Andrew. I might have legal rights about James, but it's final. There's final settlement. It's Andrew's dollar. So there's some things that you just want finality. One thing I would talk about is a lot of merchants in the US don't like paying 2.5% to 3% of all their sales to the payment system, Visa, First Data, and so forth. A lot of that goes to the banks, not to Visa and First Data, and a lot of that is also for what's called chargebacks. So I was the chief financial officer of the Hillary campaign. Now, it was really lousy that we lost for a lot of reasons beyond this discussion about blockchain. But I continued to be the CFO for the next 6 months because we had to wind down a campaign, and we had to deal with what I called the computer and refrigerator graveyard. You know, hundreds of people we had working at headquarters left the equipment, and they left. But the other thing I had to deal with for 60 days was chargebacks. You know, the donors could go to Visa and say, no, I didn't really buy that donation. You know, whether it was $50, you know, low dollar, or $2,700. And, you know, so I have a personal, you know, sense of this whole chargeback thing. Now, donations to a political campaign are different than services you buy, but it's something merchants deal with a lot. Hugo.
Are merchants responsible then to pay Visa to refund the client, or is it on Visa and First Data? Like,
we were in essence the merchant, and yes, we had to pay. The campaign, and as this happens in every losing campaign, it didn't have anything to do with it.
You've already spent the money.
That's a problem. That's a real problem. And what the payment processing companies, in that case, it's a matter of public record. We used a company called Stripe rather than First Data and so forth. I mean, the Stripes of this world are taking some counterparty risk. Now, most merchants are not shutting down. We were shutting down, you know, but yeah. So effectively, it's on the merchant. Cost of trust. In blockchain, there is a cost of trust, but it's trusting the code, the computer code. You're trusting the Bitcoin core developers, so to speak, and the consensus protocol. So when some people say it's trustless, it's not truly trustless. You still have to trust the code. You have to trust the consensus protocol versus the trust in the central intermediary. So it's sort of trade-off of yes, Ali?
You're also trusting the network in Bitcoin. Just a reminder.
Yes, you're trusting the network in Bitcoin. It's a very good point. I think by and large, we all trust the network even when we're dealing with Citibank as well. But you're right that right in the center of a blockchain solution, you're trusting the network for all its communications. But even at a central intermediary, there's some trust in the network.
Yeah, but not for correctness. So in Bitcoin, you can double spend if the network messes up. But in a permissioned algorithm, you cannot double spend if the network messes up.
There's different issues. I agree with that. You're good at yours.
I mean, I would go one step further and say you also trust the ISP, right? Not just Citibank, but you're trusting the intermediary that gets you to Citibank's website. But they're not going to put some fake website in between there. Right. So there's layers of trust all throughout this.
That's right. And I drive a car, not when I'm in Boston, I drive a car and I'm trusting the carburetor as well, and I don't really know how a carburetor works. So there's all sorts of layers of trust, but I would say that the central trade-off with blockchain is you're moving away from trusting the central intermediary and you're trusting code and consensus. And then economic rents, and we've talked about this. I mean, it is not the reason why payment systems cost 0.5% to 1% of GDP around the globe, but some of that is economic rents. And the financial sector in the U.S. is $1.5 trillion or 7.5% of our economy. There's a fair degree of economic rents in there. So these are kind of the 6 or 7 things, not only that I think is worthwhile to discern out of Christian Cannellini's paper, but it's also to Paul Krugman. There are legitimate things that you would say, well, we can maybe lower the cost of verification. The second big piece in Cannellini, he talked about networks. Now, these are my words, not his, but it's basically the value networking, moving property rights. But again, because I'm thinking blockchain is about property rights. I mean, we can talk differently, but moving some property right or computer code that's going to trigger a smart contract that's going to be installed and move some property rights around. And does blockchain have an ability to lower the cost to develop or operate the network? Basically, in Cannellini's words, to jumpstart the network or get over the collective action challenges. And collective action challenges are always in business when you're trying to start a business. Some businesses, it's really hard to get over the collective action issues. I mean, I don't know that any of you would have read a business case on Federal Express. But when I first went to business school, they still had a case on Federal Express because the gentleman, I think it was Fred Smith, who started this incredible idea. How do you do overnight delivery the first day? How do you make sure you have enough airplanes to fly all the packages, in his case to Memphis, Tennessee, and then to fly the packages somewhere else where you have no customers? You have no employees, and you have all these collective action issues within one company. Uber, Bitcoin itself had to get and jump over and build a network. Facebook built a network. You know, there's all sorts of study about how you build a network and how you sort of move towards a network and get the big payday of a network. Blockchain can be part of that. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it is one thing. Christian speaks about two things. A token, and yes, token economics might not have much to do with many things, but a token might incentivize and help fund the network. So it's a new form of crowdfunding. And economically speaking, there's been crowdfunding for centuries, but I mean, it's a new form of crowdfunding, kind of building on what Kickstarter.
This. Ja. Ja, yeah. Ja. If you yeah, play with this and it's channel, yeah, you see one, and you hear that wave and it changes, so
So
it's
this noise is weird. And this is coming from your system, right?
yeah, it's but when I'm mute. And when it opens, it's like.
Okay, but then you are getting this signal directly to your system, right?
Yeah, this is that one.
Okay, I see. Okay, then I will set like one more channel for the guy who's coming.
No, I don't know if it's not a big thing, that noise, but yeah, you can try with one of your microphones and see if it's better, because this is just a separate system.
Yeah.
So either I take that microphone from you, and you just put it in like a nice voice, and I'll adjust the levels at my mixer, or we don't bother. It's not super terrible. It's just.
Yeah. Okay, but I will try to do that.
Good. I run and eat.
said that this is this floor is from 9 to.
Hans Morten, jeg må tilbake. Superb, ciao. Kom on.
The Belfast number 3 and number 4 are sharing the same frequency.
Yeah, that's not good. So number 4 should be 12.
Should be 12. Okay.
Do you know how to set them?
I don't know how to change the frequencies because it varies from country to country actually.
Yeah, but here it's freeze settings.
Okay.
So on setting and free like sensitivity and frequency set. Number 4, that's do not touch. Control.
Nice. Nice.
That's quite annoying when sharing the same frequency.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have 4 microphones now, and they are coming to the console as channel 1 to 4, and then I'm waiting for the other microphone for the guy tonight. So
Yeah, but that's one of these.
okay, the same one.
Same system, same.
Okay, then I will use number 4, the number 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
For instance.
Yeah. So do you want to? But do you want to go to take a dinner?
It's already done.
Okay, that's nice.
I am efficient.
So I think.
And I love the babaji. It's an Indian. But when I work, I eat it too fast, so now I got like pissed off tita lamb curry, and I'm full.
So do you want to receive this signal into channels? What channels?
I'll
Or
take
what-
them
what,
in here.
Yeah. What is like you are connected like because I can send the signals through as a bus. You know, like a submix.
Yeah.
Okay. But you are connected. You are.
Yeah, I can. These XLRs aren't in use when I get a signal from you.
Okay, so you are using just 2 XLR cables.
Yeah.
Not through the link. That's
yes,
also possible, but.
No, I think instead of me mixing it, it's better that you.
And
do a
I
nice
send you just stereo, right?
I'll just get stereo his voice.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so yeah. Then I will bring a couple of XLR cables and I will give you stereo mix of everything.
Oh, one voice. So,
Yeah.
but later on it's 4 voices.
Yeah.
here. Ja. Alex som skal kjøre sendinga da, så at vi bare tenker å ha deg. Jeg vet at alle nå snakker vi med Alex om det, eller om du må finne deg litt til rette her da. Ja, det skal stå, ja. Ja, det skal egentlig sitte på den her da. Spørsmålet er selvfølgelig. Ja, da kommer du litt høyere. Så ikke du sitter for langt, men så ser det ut som en sånn liten gutt. Her får du litt mer sånn. Ja, da blir du ja, du får jo opp her. Og dette første gang på meg. Ja. Med sånn skjerm. Ja. Jeg har gjort arrangementene hittil i korona helt hjemme. Ja. Så det har vært en stor prøve da. Det gøyeste var nasjonale bibliotek i Jerusalem. Det blir jo samme som du her, ikke sant? Jeg får faktisk det var oppmerksomhet. For hvem da? For nasjonalbibliotek i Jerusalem. Når den var ordnet i israelsk ambassade. Så det var det mest eksotiske da. Så jeg til Bergen. Så jeg har ikke prøvd det her da. Men det blir morsomt. Jeg rekker å prøve det før det går over. Hæ? Jeg rekker å prøve det før det går over. Nei, men det kan jo hende at du ser liksom sånn, så jeg intervjuet John Bolton og et par andre fra USA i fjor. Det er jo en måte å liksom få de svære navn på uten å måtte jobbe seg, uten å bruke hele åpningssettet. Nettopp. Så det er jo sikkert noen måter å fortsette med. Så tenker jeg sånn, vi er tilbake til normalt, så kan du jo, man må jo ikke sitte hjemme heller, man kan jo ha folk inne litt flotte konferanser i sånne ledda, eller som en del av det. Ja. Det går jo. Vi tester alltid da, så skal det funke. Så bare han sitter hjemmeperson der. Bare han ikke har linjen, så går det fint. Ja. Men da er det liksom avhengig av hans brev. Ja, det er helt avhengig av at det funker sånn, at ikke han sitter i den parken du som er stund. Jeg vet at han har 3 unger, så det er bare sånn gøy samtidig. Ja, hva synes du om boka? Jeg synes det var ganske bra. Noen ting er veldig bra da. Jeg synes det er overdådig for lesningen, altså komedier til det. Så han har fått det skikkelig. Så synes jeg han har fått det skikkelig bra. Jeg er vel skeptisk til historiske romaner. Jeg mener at de ofte medfører mange pedagogiske løft da, hvor de forklarer for mye hvordan det var på 70-tallet. Men de menneskene som var der, de jo ville visst det. Og så går romanen litt i stykker på det da. Så det at han har valgt sånn nåtids, han har ikke grunnleggende anakronistisk sammenhengsoppdrag, men det funker veldig bra. Nei, så hvis det var noe jeg hadde innvendig, så er det sånn at den legger for seg liksom ingenting da. Det er jo litt av gleden der masse, så det er liksom sånn at det som er bra med den kan liksom litt gå over det. Men, og så skjønner man jo hvorfor den er anakronistisk, sant? For den er jo ganske sånn glatt i stilen. Men i sum så jeg hadde anmeldt den positivt. Jeg synes det var en veldig, veldig klar mann. Og den gir jo ganske mye, selvfølgelig, det har gitt enda mer til en sånn samfunnsdiskusjon da. Hvis man hadde hatt en litt klarere motpol, det er sånn som Thomas Manns Trollmannsfjellet, så har du liksom mørk og lys, og de som kjemper mot hverandre. Her er det på en måte han Salini, han har jo ikke levd, han har jo ikke på en måte opplysningsmann nok til å klare å liksom strikke imot hele fluens sverdeklandskap da. Men det er veldig... Men du har ikke sikret originalmanuset som skrevet tilbake på lyset? Nei, det er som sa vi, altså han Legans. Ja, det er vel han som har skrevet det. Hei, Alex. Hei. Skjønne tag. Skjønne tag. Eller good day, som jeg må si da. Selv. Ja. Det er et helvetes skinn av den her. Ja, men det er ikke... Det var du som... Det var du som har plaget. Jeg håper han ansiktet sitt sånn at jeg ser det. Nei, men så kan vi prøve å justere den. Det kan vi teste etterpå da. Jeg kommer bare an på hvor han dukker opp det. Ja, det her hjelper kanskje litt. Ja, da kommer det mer utenlandsene. Så er det mer sannsynlig at han... Hvis han dukker opp i midten, så ser han. Godt. Skal vi ta en bråtest med deg i... Jeg er transover. I spill. Ja, logisk. Hello. Det er også en skjeng til sommer. Mr. Transover. Men da kan du risikere at han dukker opp hvis vi bruker den samme lenka da. Ja, men det er jo Det er det bildet hans her, da. Hvis
Hvis
vi
sier ikke fornærmende ting.
Det er det bildet hans her, ikke sant? Ja. Hvorfor bruker du det på TV? Fordi nå, siden du ikke har fått, så er det... Åja,
Hvor er publikum for meg sånn primært da?
Det har du noen innspill hvor jeg ser det sammen.
Men for eksempel
når du holder et innlegg. Hvis du først starter det, hei og velkommen jata jata, og så når du i dag, bang, yeah, action. Når han på en måte kommer på scenen, så er det ja, total. Men da snakker du kun med han. Nei, men jeg tenkte mest på begynnelsen, sånn at jeg vet hva publikummet sier. Og